then initiate contact. Ball carrier receives a ground ball, challenges the defender, defender makes body contact. She rolls the ball back to the coach rolls out the ball, picks it up, body contact. Yeah, totally. A pressure, defense can move. Yeah, like you make the cones wider maybe. Again, this is a principle where more space is actually more pressure instead of small space, depending on if you're working on offense or defense. If you're working on defense, more space is harder for defense. If you're working on offense, less space is harder for offense. So you can move the cones closer or farther, depending where you want it. And then another pressure principle you could do is that they have to do it 5 times in 20 seconds or something like that. Okay. These are my do's and don'ts. If I can claim a slide as the most important, this might be it, right here, in this presentation. These are things I've learned from personal experience, and I'm sure that there is like terms to all of these in the book somewhere that I should have read before learning them the hard way. The do's and don'ts of a progressive practice plan is what we're talking about. So it's going to have variation and pressure principles in it. So the do's. Do change variations often to keep interest. We talked about that. No sticks, number of balls, location on the field, etc. I wouldn't spend longer than 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the attention span of your players, on one variation. It gets boring. Don't change the pressure principles often, or you will lose the focus, or your players will get frustrated. So if you have a pressure principle of defense, and then you add a pressure of time, it's really frustrating as a player to learn how to work around that defender and then suddenly have to work with time as well. I would recommend not changing the pressure principles quickly or adding one to another. Do keep the practice plan to one skill or revisit the skill if it's not being grasped. Again, when I first was learning this concept, my initial thought was, how am I going to have time to get all of these progressions in a season? And then my thought was, well, after I do it once, do I need to do it again? Yeah, of course. Like, don't be afraid to revisit a skill. I had an alumni text me the other day, and she said, do you have a book of compiled drills? And I said, no, because it would take, with the way that I do my practices now, it would take me a really long time to say, okay, no sticks, ground balls, and then sticks, ground balls, and then shovels, ground balls, and then, like, I'm not going to write all that out. So you could revisit the skills, and you will have so many that I feel like it keeps the practice fresh for your players, as opposed to say, let's do star drill, ready, go. Star drill with 2 balls today, ready, go. Does that make sense? Do not progress the skill or plan until it's done correctly. So again, don't be afraid, especially with new players, to make sure that they get the extra practice. We of course don't want to push them away from the sport. Don't be like, you can't catch and pass yet, so you don't get to work on hurdling until you can. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that if a player is still struggling with a skill, don't be afraid to revisit it or make sure that your multi-team understands the drill before moving on to the next one. Again, depending on your time frame for your season. Do teach critical thinking and innovation. So this goes back to the creativity. After you build your base, I think it's so important to teach the girls, like, what can you do to think outside the box? Bounce pass? Never heard of it. Want to try it? Go for it. Like, bounce pass is the next thing in lacrosse, I'm calling it. Where it's intentional. Like, oh no, I'm falling out of bounds. I'm going to bounce pass it to my teammate who's in bounds. Like, smart, awesome. Don't. This is a really hard one, especially with new girls. Create a drill that allows bad habits. So one that I saw the other day was they put a pile of balls in the middle, and there's 4 different teams around the ball, and they blew their whistle, and all the girls had to go out and pick up a ground ball while everybody else was coming in to pick up a ground ball, and reach for it, and turn right back to where they came from, and drop it off at their cone, which I feel like creates 2 bad habits. Jabbing, because you can't run through the ball, there's other people there, and then going right back to where you came from, where in a game you want to teach them to find space forward. So although it's a fun drill, right, the girls like it because it's a relay, I would really discourage using a drill like that because it allows really bad habits.
Could you do the same thing but they run through instead of picking up and turning?
Yes, yeah, so in the same sort of drill, this is how it was set up. So they had it set up in a box like this. They had their pile of balls in here, right? And each player would come out and pick it up and come back. That's how they originally had it set up. What you could do to set it up is you could still do a relay. There's a pile of balls right here, there's a pile of balls right here, there's a pile of balls right here, there's a pile of balls right here. This player has to run to this pile of balls and pick it up. And then she could even come back. I don't think that's a terrible idea. Or she could just finish to this side, and these girls are on the same team, and whoever picks up their balls the fastest wins. Yeah, totally. Or you could just go straight across with two balls like this, or two groups like this. And these girls are on a team, and these girls are on a team. So she just runs through, picks up a ground ball, gets in line, runs through, picks up a ground ball, gets in line, runs through, picks up a ground ball, gets in line, and it's a race, gets to that team. And I think it teaches the exact same principle. Fun for new girls, still a relay, without the jab and the turn back, everything like that. Do add pressure skills as players are ready. This is a very, I love the pressure skills, but they also can like make or break a team. I've learned this one from experience that if you add the wrong pressure skill at the wrong time, it creates a lot of frustration for the players. So I'm going to read through this note that I have because I have a hard time keeping up with this thought, but I want to present it to you guys. So if it's too wordy, you don't know how to listen to it. If we're talking about passing, let's say in our last game that we struggled with passing. Well, what part of passing? Did we struggle passing in tight spaces? Did we struggle passing in big spaces? Did we struggle passing under pressure? Did we struggle passing into 8? You know, you can think of all sorts of things. Did we just struggle passing in general? And then you could base a practice plan off of that. So let's say your team struggled passing in general. Then you might want to start back with the basics of just star drill with one ball. Let's say your players struggled with passing under pressure. Then you do star drill with the defender. If your players struggled passing on long passes, then you do star drill big, so they have to make those long passes. Does that make sense? You can still take that drill and cater it to what you need. Try not to pick two though. So I had a game with my players where it was specifically with drop step. I think that's why I picked that skill for this presentation. They just kept getting into trouble, and when they would run out of it, they'd just get back checked, like over and over and over, and it was frustrating me so bad. So we came to practice, and I just like threw them into a drill that was defense and time and space. And what I ended up with was a lot of really frustrated girls that were like, what the heck? Like, you mad, coach? Yes, I am. That it just made them more frustrated because instead of adding that pressure one at a time and working on it throughout a practice, I just threw all three in, and it was very frustrating. So add the skills as they're ready. Don'ts. Don't have more than one pressure principle at a time. That's exactly what it said. Okay, are there any questions on that? Okay, here is the last idea that I'd like to go over. I was at a conference in the fall, and they went over this idea of one coach gave a presentation that was all about skill training. It was very similar to mine. And then one gave a presentation that was literally about decision training and why decision over skill training is the win, right? I think I was very enlightened after hearing both. You need both. You have to have both. Just like when, and you know, your little girls probably aren't going to understand this, but when you go to a job, they probably don't just sit you down and say, ready, go, you'll learn as you make mistakes, right? No boss wants to pay you to make mistakes. They're going to train you. They're going to teach you how to do what they want, and then as mistakes come up, they'll help you correct them and move forward. Same thing with lacrosse. And again, your little girls might not understand that. You could even say, like, if they take piano lessons, though, your teacher's not going to sit you down at the piano and say, just try something, and then I'll correct you where you're wrong. Like, what would you do as a little kid? Like, you know? But if you teach them their scales and their notes and how to play the piano, then suddenly they can be as creative as they want and make those decisions on their own. So the point that I want to make with this slide is that both are very, very important. I think skill training comes first and decision training comes second. Skill training teaches the muscle memory and the footwork, even if they don't always do it correct in the game. So I don't correct my girls once we've gone over the skill a couple of times, if they're doing it wrong, because sometimes in the game you have to figure out how to get out of trouble without like, okay, step with my left foot, pivot here. I don't have a pass. What am I going to do? Let's try again. You don't have that luxury in the game. You know, you gotta just make decisions. It's a great base for players to build on. In controlled situations and skill training, you do a lot of controlled situations. They know exactly who they're passing to. They know exactly where the ball is coming from, stuff like that. Then you can go to uncontrolled situations. In my example of drop step, that would have been when they were around the 8. Suddenly it's uncontrolled. Did the defense slide in time? Did they not? Should I have drop step sooner? Should I have passed with my left hand? Etc. Yeah. And then skill training comes before decision training. It'll give them game experience and learn how to do variations. So again, if they get in a tight spot in a game, maybe all the training they went through went out the window, but at least they have the basics to know, oh, this is where I'm trying to end up, even if I can't get there with the exact footwork that my coach taught me. And then draw from the skills learned through skill training, and it definitely comes after skill training.
So if you're coaching that for a second, and the skill training is much more, okay, we know how to teach the skill training. How are you teaching the decision
training? I know, this is one that I really struggle with because my assistant coaches had termed me this year as a helicopter coach. I hope I don't parent the same way. I have a really, really young team this year. I have a ton of turnover, and so I've very much been skill training where I'm trying to tell my girls exactly what decisions they have to make. And we've come to this conclusion when we've started playing games that then they're a little lost. Like, coach, what do I do? Well, we went over every situation, so pick whichever one was relevant. That's not going to work in a game. What we started doing is asking them why they chose to do something. So if I had a player in my drop step drill who approached the double team and pivoted with her wrong foot and came out of the double team was holding her stick in the wrong hand, then in practice I might say, hey, why did you decide to do that instead of switching to your other hand? And she might say, I don't know. And if that's the case, then you've actually got a really good base to start with to say, okay, here's why I want you to switch hands so that you're protecting your stick, right? She may say something like, I'm not comfortable with my left hand yet, so I just kept it in my right hand, right? And then you can build from there. Okay, well, next time we do passing, let's do a little bit more left hand than right hand. I do find sometimes my girls will just be like, I don't know. I was focused on what was happening in front of me, and I wasn't thinking about the next step, in which case that's a great opportunity to say, make sure you take the game one step at a time. I think if you give them the opportunity to say why they did something, then they have the opportunity to think of their own process of thinking, of why they tried something or didn't try something. I'm sure you could find a lot of research on that too, but that's what I found has worked for my girls. Any other questions?
This might be jumping forward, but just on these individual skill training versus decision training, how do you break up your practices between drills and just letting the girls scrimmage?
Good question. If it was my girls' decision, they would scrimmage all day.
Yeah, we are too.
Yeah. We have a pretty general rule of thumb, unless for some reason we need to work on something specific. I give my girls like 20 to 25 minutes to scrimmage every day.
And how long
What
of
amount of
practice?
time?
Our practice is an hour 45. So it's actually it's a hefty chunk of practice when you think about, stretching, warm-ups, shuttles, whatever else. It's actually, with warm-ups and scrimmage in my practice, that only gives me time to do like 3 drills in the middle.
And will you coach a lot during that scrimmage, or will you let them play?
Yeah.
You'll stop playing, coach quite a bit.
Yeah, so I'll give my disclaimer before we start. Today I'm stopping.
Oh, I like that.
Today I'm stopping and we're working on our lines. If you don't slide into 12, I'm blowing my whistle. Offense, sorry, you don't get to finish the play, right? And then there's other days where, okay, we're focusing on offensive plays today. Offense, if you don't run the play right, I'm blowing my whistle, we're restarting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll tell my girls, like, I'm not gonna blow the whistle once today. And you're just gonna have to figure out how to play through your missed sliding, or your missed crash, or your wrecked play. Does that make sense? I think both are very beneficial though. If you blow the whistle all the time, you become that helicopter coach. If you let them play through their mistakes of missing the slide or missing the crash, then they realize, oh, that led to a goal. Whereas if you blow the whistle and they don't slide to 12, they never see what could have progressed. Yeah, but I think it's really important to tell them what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Except for reffing. I found this is a disclaimer. You should try it with your girls, especially if you've got some feisty ones like I did. Don't tell them how you're going to ref that day. Sometimes ref like really strict. And some days ref like super lenient. And see what happens. And then tell them that they're going to have different refs all the time. It's a really good principle for them to learn that it doesn't matter what the ref calls. You should have it.
So do you have any philosophy about warm-ups? Like, when you absolutely don't leave out what's really important?
I wish I could say yes. Warm-ups is one of the things I've struggled the most with my team specifically, because I have a lot of girls that want the same thing every time because it's pregame, it's their ritual. And I have a lot of girls that need to break up the monotony. It almost becomes too routine for them. And we play enough games. How many games do you guys play this season? About 7?
A little more than that, yeah.
Okay.
10.
Okay, so high school's a little more than that, right? Like 14 out, 12. Oh, 12. Okay, so by the end of the season, if we make it to nationals, we play about 18 to 20. So our girls are really, it becomes monotonous. If you only have 6 games, 6 to 10, I recommend doing the same thing. I do, I change my warm-ups. I guess this is an important point. I change my warm-ups from practice from my games. They're different warm-ups.
Okay.
So that their practice warm-up, they know what to expect, they're ready for practice mode, and their game warm-ups, I feel like, are different enough that we're not practicing, we're getting ready for a game, but they have similar elements. So I'll give you an example. In practice, my girls do a warm-up lap, and then they do dynamic stretching. And I'm pretty lenient with how they stretch. But then when it comes to game, we do a warm-up lap, and they do their stretching together. It's still dynamic, and it's the exact same stretches we do in practice, but now they're all following each other. And then we do strides, which they do a lot in track and cross country. It's just starting on one line and rolling sprints to the next. So it has similar elements, but I just add a little bit more structure so that they know what's going on. Similar to that, in practice, we vary our warm-up passing. A lot of people do shuttles, is their warm-ups. I do those for every game. We do shuttles, but in practice, we do all sorts of basic drills before, and sometimes we don't do shuttles at all. So that is another one that they kind of know. Shuttles are happening today. We know exactly which shuttles they are. They're going to be this long, and that gets the prep for game. Whereas in practice, we might not do shuttles at all. We might just do, a box passing drill or something like that.
Okay.
To sum that up, I would recommend keeping it consistent for games, but I would change it a little bit from practice. Would be our recommendation. Any other questions? That is.
Slightly off of
Please,
this
yes.
presentation, but just think about how you divide up your practices. How much time are you spending with your girls on just general physical conditioning? Like, we're running sprints or we're doing whatever versus still?
That's a good question. It actually might surprise you. So we have practice 5 days a week with my players. Our BYU policy is that we don't have 10 hours of practice total. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have state practice for an hour 45 minutes, and Tuesday, Thursday, they do an hour of conditioning to an hour and a half. So out of that 10-hour span, about a third of it is conditioning, which actually, that seems high to me personally as a coach. For the amount of skill that goes into lacrosse specifically, it's a technical skill. It's just like tennis or golf. You really have a lot of skill and technique training that you need to do, but we spend a lot of time on conditioning. About a third. Yeah. Good question. I think that's pretty normal actually across the country though. The more coaches I talk to, the more say they spend a lot of time on conditioning.
This is very specific.
Yeah.
I have some girls that have a lot of tunnel vision.
Yeah.
They get the ball and they go right down the field. And holy hell, they'll run right into 3 defenders.
Yes.
And they've got people they can pass to right up here.
Yeah.
How do I break that? I mean, how do I tried, even 3 steps, take 3 steps and pass the ball.
Right.
I don't care.
Ultimate. Yeah.
Just don't hold it.
Right.
Any suggestion?
How are your players catching? Like, are they reliable?
Very well.
Oh, okay. Then.
Very well. But
Okay.
even some of the ones that can catch very well still get tunnel vision. And they forget that they've got help. hanging out.
Well, I'm talking about the help. Is
You're
the help
Oh,
you're a
because
main
if
catch?
they're
The help and catch.